Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name is the latest installment in the Yakuza series by Sega's RGG Studios. Originally planned to be part of the upcoming release Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, then planned to be DLC for that game before it finally became its own spin-off game. With an insanely fast development time of only 6 months, this game promised to be an entertaining and important bridge between the last two entries in the series and the upcoming much-anticipated sequel. Did it live up to the hype? Did it even have hype? Let's find out. Hello everyone, and welcome to OurTake. Today I want to talk to you about the newest game in one of my all-time favorite video game franchises. I'd like to take you all through my experience of this somewhat complicated, as well as emotional and entertaining story, as well as breaking down all the elements of gameplay and the ins and outs of the hours of fun side content it offers. If you've never played a Yakuza game before, don't worry. I'll give you a spoiler-free rundown of most of the game, and when we get to the story, skip to this timestamp to avoid spoiling it for yourself. I'll put that on screen again when we get there, but for now, let's dive in head first. For many years, the Yakuza series has been the brainchild of RGG studio founder Toshihiro Nagoshi. Nagoshi was a longtime employee of Sega and might be best known as the creator of Super Monkey Ball. However, in late 2021, he left both Sega and RGG Studio to form his own game studio. This means that Like a Dragon Gaiden is the first game in the series to not have Nagoshi involved in some way or another. This had me nervous for the future of the series initially, but I was put at ease when I learned that longtime writer for the series, Masayoshi Yokoyama, was taken over as studio head. Yokoyama has been writing for the series for the very beginning, and if Nagoshi isn't the one running things anymore, then he's the one I want in charge, because I trust he's going to do his best to guide the series going forward. This game was viewed by the developers as a side project to the upcoming mainline game, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. That game stars both Kazuma Kiryu and Ichiban Kasuga as the protagonists. However, Kiryu's story was brought to an end in Yakuza 6, The Song of Life. This posed a challenge for RGG Studio. How could they connect the end of Yakuza 6 to the new game? They first thought of making a single chapter as a flashback that could fill the gap, but they thought that would be too out of place and pull away from the greater narrative. They then decided to turn this idea into its own standalone game. They envisioned a game with the main story length similar to the Kaito Files DLC from Lost Judgment, while also having the traditional Yakuza formula of side quests and minigames. The same team that created Infinite Wealth also created Gaiden at the same time. Talk about a busy 2023, huh? Gaiden had a pretty short development time of only 6 months, but it makes sense since it was viewed as a fill-in game. Like a Dragon Gaiden takes place during the same time as Yakuza 7 and follows Kazuma Kiryu's new role as an undercover agent for the Daidoji faction. Most of the game is set in the familiar Sotenbori district of Osaka, with the exception of Chapter 1, which takes place in Ijincho in Yokohama. This game features the return of the much-beloved Dragon engine. The last installment of the series, Like a Dragon Ishin, had Unreal Engine 4 as its engine, and it felt like a huge downgrade. I'm glad that they decided to make the spin-off in the superior engine. It really does make a giant difference. Instead of gaining experience to level up, you need two things: money and Akame points. Money is pretty straightforward. Each ability costs a set amount to level up, with the amount increasing for higher level abilities. While money isn't as easy to earn as in Yakuza 0, it's still not that big of a chore to get. If you're having trouble with it, I'd recommend grinding out the arena, as the last couple of challenges are just like printing money. Akame points are named after a new character who is Kiryu's primary contact in Sotenbori, Akame. Get used to her, you're going to be seeing her a lot. We'll talk about her more later, but what you need to know right now is that she gives you requests via the Akame network, and each request gives you Akame points. Requests aren't the only way to earn them. Filling out the completion list will also do the trick. This is the harder of the two to earn for leveling up, as you really can't grind out Akame points like you can do with money. This installment features the return of different fighting styles for Kiryu. In previous games that Kiryu had different styles, he had 4 styles. Those styles being Brawler, Rush, Beast, and Dragon, or Legend, as it was called in Yakuza 0. Like a Dragon Gaiden keeps it simple with only 2 fighting styles. The first is Yakuza style. Don't let this name confuse you, this is the same as Dragon style from the previous games. The second is a brand new style called Agent style. Going along with the theme of Kiryu being a secret agent for the Daidoji, Agent style utilizes several different gadgets in order to take down your foes. These gadgets are Spider, Firefly, Serpent, and Hornet. When you hear Spider, think Spider-Man, because that's exactly how it functions. Kiryu's got his own web shooter. He can use it to grab enemies from afar, he can immobilize them for a few seconds by tying them up in webs, he can use it to start combos, and lastly, you can use it in my favorite way, throwing enemies across the map. It starts out as weak, only having 1 strand to shoot out, but over time you can upgrade to 4 strands. This is one of the most useful abilities in the game, and one that I used over and over again. Next is Firefly. Firefly is an exploding cigarette. It functions as a timed mine that you can use to devastate an effect against your enemies. Just like Spider, it starts out weak and you can only use one, but through leveling up, you can make them more powerful and you can even use multiple of them at the same time. Although it can be a good ability, I really didn't use it that often due to something we're going to get to in just a little bit. Serpent is my favorite gadget and probably the most useful one of the bunch. It's basically rocket boots and it rules. You can boost right through enemies, knocking them down and dealing a bit of damage. It's also useful for getting yourself out of sticky situations. Surrounded by thugs and get double teamed? Simply use Serpent to get yourself away. It's really useful in the Coliseum side missions. I would definitely say it's the best and most useful gadget. And since we just talked about the best gadget, let's talk about the worst gadget, Hornet. Hornet is an aerial drone that you can summon to help fight with you. You can summon multiple of them at the same time and have them attack enemies. Now, you could do that, but why? Why would you do that? I personally very rarely used Hornet, as just use a different gadget. It's on the bottom of the list for me. Agent Style starts out as pretty underpowered, but as the game advances and you upgrade your abilities, it becomes very strong. I use it primarily for going up against hordes of enemies, as it really shines when you use it for crowd control. It has a lot of moves and combos that can hit multiple enemies at once, and if you use extreme heat mode and perform a simple combo of just the basic attack over and over, you can easily clear out rooms of enemies. However, it does have one major flaw. Now, I played this game on the Xbox Series X, which of course means I use a controller. Real Yakuza use a gamepad after all. A controller only has a limited number of buttons. Here's the problem with that. Each gadget is already mapped to a pre-existing attack button. You know, Firefly mapped to basic attack, Hornet mapped to strong attack, etc. You activate each gadget by holding the button instead of just pressing it. That doesn't sound like too much of a problem, right? Wrong. Because each button already has an additional attack mapped to holding it down. This means that sometimes when you try to activate a gadget, you'll end up doing just a regular attack instead. There is a way to make sure that you're actually using a gadget instead of attacking. That's by being far away from enemies. You see, the closer you are to enemies, the more likely you are to have an attack auto-focus on them, and gadgets can only be used when you aren't focused on the enemy. Also, I just want to make clear that when I say focus on, I don't mean lock on. You can't use gadgets while using the lock on button anyways. I can't even tell you how many times I was in combat and trying to activate a gadget just to do an attack instead, but if I had to guess, easily in the hundreds. There is a way to remap buttons, but here's the kicker. For some reason, you can't map gadgets. Firefly and Hornet are the ones that suffer from this the most, which is why I just use them the least. Overall, Agent Style is a fun and powerful combat style. I just made a big deal about gadgets activating, but if you just don't use Firefly and Hornet, it's really not that much of an issue. I didn't use it in the main story that often, but Agent Style really shines bright in the Coliseum content. With Agent Style out of the way, let's go over Yakuza Style real quick. Like I said, this is just Dragon Style from earlier in the series. It's the one that's most familiar to me, and therefore that's the one I use the most. It also helps that it's my favorite fighting style in the series too. Yakuza Style is the one that you're going to be using to deal out all your damage. It's incredibly strong for one-on-one fights, especially boss battles. It can also be used for group attacks, although not as effectively as Agent Style. Many of the best and most powerful abilities make a return too, like the fearsome Tiger Drop. It's not as strong as it was in Kiwami, but it's still a deadly move. When Yakuza Style is used in tandem with Extreme Heat Mode, you can blaze through any combat challenge in the game. Both styles complement each other very well, and once you figure out how to use and switch between them naturally mid-fight, combat can become really fun. I personally am a sucker for the Yakuza games that have multiple fighting styles, and this game's combat fits in right with all the others in terms of fluidity and entertainment. I usually play Yakuza games on hard difficulty, but I decided to go with normal this time around, as I haven't played a Dragon Engine game in a while. I kind of actually regret my choice of not choosing hard, as the combat ceases to pose much of a challenge once you start leveling up a bit. The first chapter and the start of the second chapter of the game is more difficult than the later parts due to not being able to buy healing items right away, not having easy access to money, but it's really not too hard, especially if you've played a Yakuza game before. There's a returning mechanic in combat called ultimate attacks. I can't remember, but I don't think this has ever been in a mainline game. I believe it's only ever been in the Judgment spin-off series. Basically, when you fight a boss or a particularly strong enemy, they suddenly back off and start charging up. They glow a bright color and they unleash their attack. If you get hit by it, it's bad news as it does a ton of damage. These attacks are way more bark than bite though. They're meant to be countered by you. If you lock on and quick step towards the enemy that's using the ultimate attack right as they start to do the attack, you'll get a prompt to mash the grab button. Do both these and you perform an ultimate counter, which knocks down your foe and deals a large amount of damage. If you're having trouble with the timing of the ultimate counter, it's really not that difficult if you use Agent Style, or if you upgrade the number of quick steps that you can use in the Yakuza style. Instead of trying to time your quick step perfectly, perform multiple quick steps back to back just a little bit before you think you probably should. It only takes one successful quick step, so might as well just throw all of them and hopefully you can get one of them to stick. Ultimate attacks really are more of a nuisance than anything else. I've seen people online struggle with them, but if you use my strategy, you'll never have a problem with them. You might get hit by one in the arena when you're fighting dozens of enemies at once, but the main story isn't going to give you too much grief with them. The biggest problem that I had with them is that they interrupt the flow of combat for me, as you have to wait for a boss to use it instead of just continuing the combo that I already had him in. I only had one game over my whole playthrough, and it was due to an ultimate attack. I had a guy down to very little health, and I thought instead of waiting for him to use his attack, I should just, get it over with and attack him. Turns out that's it's a pretty bad idea. So I would just deal with the annoyance of waiting if I were you. You can also get in trouble with it if you jump the gun and go straight to mashing the B button like I did right here. Alright, now that the stage is set, let's break down the main story. Once again, here's that timestamp. Please use it if you have not played the Yakuza series. I would not want this to spoil the whole series for you. No big deal, we'll see you at the end. For everyone else, let's go. We start the story off with a woman leaving a club late at night, and some men start to harass her. Our protagonist, Kazuma Kiryu, comes to her rescue and appears to be her bodyguard. A quick fight ensues, and Kiryu wins and escorts the girl away. We cut to perhaps the worst title card in the series. That's just my opinion, though. We cut to Kiryu meditating in a Shinto shrine. It gives us a quick flashback to the end of Yakuza 6. Just to refresh your memory, here's a rundown. Kiryu defeats Iwami, but in the process takes a bullet to save Haruka, Haruto, and Yuta from being shot. He ends up in the hospital, and the government tries to cut a deal with him by bribing him millions of yen so that Kiryu won't reveal the crimes of the Daidoji faction. Kiryu makes a counteroffer. He will fake his death and disappear in order to guarantee his silence. He leaves his old life behind, all of his friends and family thinking he is dead, with the exception of Date. Good old Date. How I miss you. Back in the present day, we learn that Kiryu is being contacted by the Daidoji faction as muscle on odd jobs, such as protecting the girl in the prologue. He goes by the codename Joryu now, and that's primarily what you will hear him being called. His handler, a man named Hanawa, assigns him on a mission to escort a shipment of gold. The gold is being exchanged by the US CIA and an undisclosed revolutionary faction somewhere in Asia. This whole mission is a little complicated, but don't worry, it's not important for later at all. At the exchange point, the fellow agents easily recognize Kiryu, and a fight takes place. All is well, and they all go back to their posts. Hanawa talks to Kiryu about the Tojo clan, and in this conversation, we learn that this game is taking place at the same time, or perhaps right before, Yakuza 7. Suddenly, they are attacked by masked men and a large man in a Hanya mask. The man in the Hanya mask also sports some distinctive Yakuza tattoos on his chest. The mission itself was revealed to be a ruse. There never was any gold. It was all a setup to kidnap Hanawa. Kiryu fends off the attackers, but in the process, one of the masked men recognizes him and says his name out loud. Back at the shrine, Kiryu chooses to not share with Hanawa the fact that he was recognized. Hanawa refers to whoever set this up as Mr. X.
Are you Mr. X?
He brings up the man in the Hanya mask and his tattoos and suggests that perhaps he's from the Seryu clan in Yokohama. He sends Kiryu to Yokohama to investigate. Kiryu spies on the Seryu clan HQ from a nearby rooftop. He is ambushed on the way out by Seryu Yakuza, and they reveal they know he was here because of a message sent to their phones from an anonymous source. The message is a picture of Kiryu on the rooftop, taken from a nearby rooftop just moments before. It seems someone is stalking Kiryu. Kiryu goes down to the street and is tailed by two men. He calls Hanawa and tells him that he's going to lure them into a trap to come after him. Kiryu enters a parking garage, and the two men are suddenly joined by many more. All of them are wearing masks, except for the leader of the group, who speaks to Kiryu. He reveals that he knows who Kiryu really is, and he says that he was the one who set up the failed kidnapping at the docks. This man is Mr. X.
You Mr. X.
He says the only reason that they were going to kidnap Hanawa was because their employer believed Kazuma Kiryu was not dead, and that he was working for Daidoji. They were going to interrogate Hanawa to find Kiryu. As this is no longer necessary, he asks Kiryu to come with him. Kiryu this whole time says he is not Kazuma Kiryu, and refuses to go with the man. A fight breaks out, and of course, Kiryu emerges on top. Hanawa shows up in a car, and they drive away, taking a handcuffed Mr. X with them. Mr. X, this time in the presence of Hanawa, once again calls Kiryu out and says he knows who he is. Hanawa is now aware that Kiryu's identity is compromised. Mr. X says he and his men are simply Osakan travelers. Suddenly, a van T-bones their car. Once they get out of the car, they're all shaken up, but they're okay. The man in the Hanya mask is back, and more masked thugs also get out of the van. Kiryu beats down the thugs, and in the process breaks the Hanya mask off the large man. It's revealed this man has tons of facial scars. Mr. X addresses this man as Shishido. Shishido fights Kiryu, and loses once again. After the fight, Mr. X is shown to have freed himself from the handcuffs, and has Hanawa at gunpoint. Hanawa tells Kiryu that to protect the one he loves most, meaning the kids back at the Morning Glory orphanage, he should leave and not try to save him. Mr. X reveals himself as Tsuruno, the Watase family captain. To refresh your memory, Watase is a recurring character in the series and is currently the Omi Alliance captain. Tsuruno has been acting under orders from Watase this whole time. Tsuruno and Shishido take Hanawa and leave the scene, but he gives Kiryu a phone and tells him to expect a call. There are some homeless men who are watching from the street this whole time, and they take Kiryu back to their camp. They patch him up and say that he can stay in a tent that usually belongs to another homeless man who's not here right now. They say the specific homeless man was nursing a spiky-haired Yakuza back to health a few days ago, and that this Yakuza was currently sleeping in the camp. From this information, it's obvious the homeless man is Namba, and the spiky-haired Yakuza is Ichiban Kasuga, as this exact scenario is an early mission from Yakuza 7. This means our game is 100% happening simultaneously with Yakuza 7. The police arrive responding to the car crash, and Kiryu leaves the camp to avoid them. He is stopped outside a convenience store by a Daidoji agent, who says he is now Kiryu's handler. The agent takes away the phone Tsuruno gave to Kiryu, and he takes him back to the shrine. At the shrine, Kiryu tells the agent that they should go after Hanawa, and that he needs the phone to be able to get the call from Tsuruno. The agent basically says the gig is up, and that this part of the mission is over. He has his men restrain Kiryu, and he leaves the shrine. On his way out, he passes by the old monk from the beginning cutscene earlier when Kiryu was first at the shrine. The monk enters the room, and he now has possession of the phone that the agent took from Kiryu. Turns out, he pickpocketed it while passing by the agent. Kiryu beats the shit out of the other agents, and the monk reveals he's not a monk. He is yet another Daidoji agent. In fact, he's the man who recruited Hanawa into the fold. He gives Kiryu back the phone and tells him to go after Hanawa. Kiryu escapes the shrine after taking down all the men guarding him. As it would turn out, trying to keep the Dragon of Dojima caged up is a bad idea. Whoa, who knew? He then receives a call from Tsuruno, who tells him to come to Survive Bar for a face-to-face meeting. Survive Bar is the bar in Yakuza 7 where Ichiban and his crew hang out. The owner and bartender, unbeknownst to Kiryu, is Kashiwagi. Kashiwagi is a long-time character in the series, and he was Kiryu's Aniki. Think of it like a mentor, but also your higher up. Way back in the 80s. He died in Yakuza 3 right in front of Kiryu, but later came back in Yakuza 7, although he has taken on a new identity, much like Kiryu himself. Unfortunately, Kashiwagi is not behind the bar this particular night, as he is out sick. Thus, Kiryu still remains ignorant of his survival. I kind of hate that they threw this in there just to tease us, but as you see, going forward this game has tons of callbacks and reused assets. Kiryu and Tsuruno meet, and Tsuruno informs him that Hanawa is alive. He also tells Kiryu he knows that he made the deal with the Daidoji to protect Haruka and Morning Glory. He insinuates that if Kiryu does not come with him, he will take Morning Glory and its residents hostage. He tells Kiryu he should join up with him and fake his death once again, this time to fool the Daidoji. The chapter ends here on a cliffhanger. Chapter 2 opens up with a short cutscene of Morning Glory in Okinawa. The kids are all still around, and we now see a 3-year-old Haruto along with his mother, Haruka. It's always bittersweet when we see them. We cut back to Survive Bar. Tsuruno explains his plot to Kiryu to fake his death and rid himself of the Daidoji. Kiryu once again denies that he is Kazuma Kiryu and refuses to go along with them. Tsuruno shows him a picture of Hanawa, who is tied up, and says that if Kiryu doesn't do as he says, he will kill Hanawa. He hands Kiryu a set of keys with a red tiger keychain and tells him to go find a person named Akame down in Osaka. Akame is supposedly the leader of a homeless commune and an important person in the Sotenbori underworld. With no other leads, he does as instructed and heads for Osaka. Kiryu asks people on the streets of Sotenbori if they can direct him to Akame. His questions land him in the middle of a street fight. He beats up some thugs, and a red-haired woman introduces herself to him. This is Akame. She asks for his help in breaking up an Omi Alliance scheme. The Omi are kidnapping homeless people and collecting their government welfare checks. Kiryu stops the Omi and frees the homeless. After a few more errands, Akame takes us to the castle. The castle is what we originally came to Sotenbori for. This was just a roundabout way of getting there. The castle is a cargo freighter ship out in the ocean whose deck has been converted into a degenerate's paradise. It's referred to as the castle because its main attraction is a large replica of the real-life Osaka castle. It's essentially Las Vegas, but like way to the extreme. Many illegal practices take place here, including a large casino and a gladiator pit called the Colosseum. The castle is run by the Kijin clan, an Omi Alliance subsidiary. The Kijin clan is a familiar family, but for me, I couldn't quite place why yet. It's one of those names that you've heard through the long-running series, but it just kind of blends in with all the others. Even though they run the whole operation, different Omi Alliance families take turns each night running the Colosseum. The Watase family is in charge on this particular night. Akame suspects this is why Kiryu was sent to her and encourages him to sign up for the Colosseum. On the way there, Kiryu runs into Shishido, the man with the Hanya mask from Chapter 1. Shishido says he was sent here to run things because he was treating his hostage, Hanawa, too roughly, a line that irks Kiryu greatly. Shishido reveals that he is a Watase family lieutenant, which means he has some pull and seniority. He's not the rank of his superior Tsuruno, but it means he is just more than your rank-and-file Yakuza. He points to a man overseeing the Colosseum from a specter box who has a quite unsettling smile on his face. He says this man is Homare Nishitani III, the patriarch of the Kijin clan. You hear that? That's the sound of that name ringing a bell in my head. When I heard this is when all the dots connected for me. If this man is Homare Nishitani III, I would assume he's either the child or the grandchild of the Homare Nishitani from Yakuza 0, which takes place in 1988, and our present game takes place in 2019. Homare Nishitani, the one from Yakuza 0, was a Kijin clan patriarch back in 1988. He was the guy who Majima modeled his mad dog persona off of. Basically, Nishitani was just like a crazy loose cannon, just like Majima. He died getting gunned down by the police right in front of Majima. Kiryu never met him, though, if I recall correctly. It will be interesting to see if Kiryu recognizes the Nishitani name or not. Kiryu tells Shishido that after he wins the Colosseum, he's coming to get Hanawa next. He then goes to sign up, where he hands over the red tiger charm given to him earlier. This charm is given as an entry token, although Kiryu was unaware until Akame just told him just now. He enters as Joryu, and to hide his identity, Akame gives him a luchador mask. This specific mask looks to be a version of the dragon/tiger mask he wore in Yakuza 3, so this one's colored pink. Kiryu makes a comment that it's stupid, and then he enters the arena. You get the option to change it, though, right before the fight if you don't like it, so you don't have to wear it. The arena rules are simple. 3 rounds, anything goes. Each round is a recreation of famous battles of Yakuza history. Round 1 is a retelling of how the Watase family took down the Blue Dragon Cartel and earned their place as a main family in the Omi Alliance. It features a man imitating Watase himself who basically murders the other fighters with a spiked baseball bat. Kiryu beats him easily. Round 2 is one we have actually seen before. It's the street fight from the Yakuza 1 finale where Kiryu escorts Haruka through the Kamurocho streets, fighting off hordes of Yakuza before his face-off with his brother Nishikiyama at the top of the Millennium Tower. There's no fake Haruka, shocker, but there's a fake Kiryu, who Kiryu is embarrassed by, but easily defeats once again. Round 3 is another old favorite. Kiryu, as Joryu, is playing the role of himself. That is to say, Kazuma Kiryu circa 2006. His opponent is a man who looks exactly like Ryuji Goda, the back tattoo and all. It's a recreation of the Yakuza 2 finale, the showdown between dragons once again. Kiryu beats the fake Goda, but also beats not 1, but 2 tigers. Yes, real-life tigers in the process. Kiryu comments that though the man may look exactly like Ryuji Goda, he has none of the talent or the class. Ryuji Goda, though never killed on screen, is truly dead and gone. At least I hope. This guy is not him. After winning the tournament, Shishido talks to Kiryu in a secluded room. He basically tells a sob story of his childhood. He talks about how he was abandoned by his parents when he was 15. He talks about growing up on the streets, fighting for a living. He mentions that it was the Kijin clan who took him in and subjected him to brutal psychological torture in order to make it in the world of the Japanese underground. He says Nishitani III is crazy, and he joined up with Watase the first chance he got. He then accuses Kiryu of not having a tough road to the top, of having everything handed to him. This guy clearly does not know his history. Kiryu basically says, he doesn't care, and he demands to know where Hanawa is being held since he was promised that info if he won the tournament. Shishido tells him the location, and he also tells him that Tsuruno is waiting for him with all the strongest Watase men. They are not going to give him up without a fight. Kiryu tells Shishido that when he rescues Hanawa, whatever damage the Watase family did to Hanawa, he is going to do to Shishido, but much, much worse. He then heads back to Sotenbori to rescue Hanawa. Even though Kiryu, and actually myself too, dismissed Shishido's background story as boo-hoo, who cares, keep a mental note of it in your head. It's going to be important for later. Kiryu enters the building where Hanawa is being held, and just as promised, there are Watase men waiting for him. While moving up the building, he defeats waves and waves of Yakuza and gets to the room where Hanawa is being held. Hanawa is bound to a chair and bloody. There's a table with all sorts of torture tools on it, which have clearly been used. Even though he's been through the ringer, Hanawa makes a joke about Kiryu taking his sweet time. Saruno and his men are there, and he once again asks Kiryu to join him. Of course, Kiryu refuses, and he fights Saruno and his men, and he manages to beat them down. He frees Hanawa, just as Saruno reveals the whole plot to Kiryu. He describes a plot involving both the Omi Alliance and the Tojo clan dissolving as entities and turning themselves in to the police. Now we, as the player, know for a fact this is all going to happen in the future, and that Kiryu will be a part of it, although he himself doesn't know it yet. This is one of the main events of Yakuza 7. He says that these orders come from Watase himself, and that all Kiryu has to do to make this happen is to kill Hanawa so that he can be free of the Daidoji. He once again mentions that Kiryu will be able to see his children in Okinawa again. This sets Kiryu off, and he shows emotion rarely seen from him. He angrily tells Saruno no, and Hanawa takes Saruno into custody. As a Watase captain is being loaded into a police van, Hanawa asks Kiryu why he didn't accept the offer. It's a good offer. Kiryu would get everything he has wanted since resigning as the 4th chairman of the Tojo clan. Kiryu says that it was his decision to leave his family and his name behind. As a flashback plays showing his adopted father Kazama, his brother Nishikiyama, and his childhood love Yumi, who also happens to be Haruka's mother, he says he knows many people who died, following what they believed in, and that he wants to be able to see them in the afterlife with a clean conscience. Hanawa takes Saruno and leaves, and Kiryu heads for Akame's place. After a while, Hanawa calls Kiryu and asks him to come to a Daidoji hideout in the city. When Kiryu gets there, it's revealed they are keeping Saruno captive in a back room. Hanawa puts Kiryu on a video call with the leader of the Daidoji faction. This man doesn't show his face, but he appears to be an old man in a wheelchair. This man commands Kiryu to kill Saruno, Shishido, Watase himself, and any others who know his identity. He says this is the only way for Kiryu to hold up his end of the bargain. The call ends, and Kiryu is left with a grim choice to make. Kiryu and the Daidoji enter the room where Saruno is being kept. Kiryu has a revolver and seems like he's going to go through with it. Suddenly, he grabs Hanawa and holds the gun to his head. He tells Saruno to get out of there and fights all the Daidoji members, allowing Saruno to escape. After the fight, Hanawa says men are waiting outside in Morning Glory to kill all his children for his betrayal. He pulls up his phone and shows live footage of the agents, so that Kiryu knows this isn't a bluff. Kiryu stands down and surrenders himself to Daidoji custody, and Hanawa calls the agents off. The chapter ends with Kiryu handcuffed in the same room Saruno was held in. Kiryu has been held captive for 3 days straight. The Daidoji come get him and place him in front of Hanawa. They give Hanawa a gun and tell him to kill Kiryu. Kiryu gets on his knees and accepts his fate. They also point their guns at Hanawa and say they will kill him if he does not comply. Hanawa suddenly drops his gun and says that he cannot kill a man who has risked his life to save his own. The Daidoji reveal that none of their guns, except Hanawa's, were loaded. It was all a test from the start. This wheelchair-bound old man wheels into the room with Saruno and says that the conflict with Watase has been resolved. Watase has given up $50 billion worth of property in exchange for Kiryu's and their own life. Kiryu is now commanded to go along with Watase's plot to end the Yakuza by the Daidoji. He says he agrees, but on one condition: the threats and spying on his family in Morning Glory must stop. Surprisingly, the Daidoji leader agrees to this. Kiryu leaves for Akame's house to recover from this ordeal. In the morning, he sets off for the castle to meet up with Saruno. I'd like to pause a moment here and just talk about the whole absurdity of the situation. I feel like now is a good example. The Yakuza series has always required you to suspend your disbelief in order to enjoy the stories that it tells. It's one thing when they throw in something over the top, like Date in a helicopter during the finale for the 3rd game in a row, or something like Kiryu defeating a tiger with his bare hands. It's another when it comes to government conspiracies. You're telling me that all the time that Kiryu spent locked away is simply done and over with because the government is just given some money, and now they actually like the Yakuza dissolution plot, and they didn't think the dissolution plot was good from the start, and they had to be convinced that ending tons of organized crime was a good thing. If it was just this, I can maybe just look past it as a convenient way to get the plot moving, even if they, meaning the developers, didn't have to put Kiryu in the room in the first place, and they could have just thought of a different way to get to their conclusion. I could have even looked past the idiocracy of giving Hanawa a loaded gun and telling him to kill your most valuable asset for funsies. One thing I cannot suspend my disbelief for is the threat they made with the agents at Morning Glory, who were waiting to rush in and massacre almost a dozen young adults and a toddler. Yes, I know, government evil, I know. Let's think about it logically, though, okay? Haruka Sawamura is a famous former idol who lost her career because of her ties to Kiryu. A major plot point in Yakuza 6 is that the paparazzi hound her at Morning Glory, and she leaves so that the rest of the kids can live in peace. Are you telling me that the death of a former famous idol and the massacre of a literal orphanage would not be investigated heavily? And that perhaps when people who are in the know hear that this orphanage that had the Dragon of Dojima's children in it, that they wouldn't start asking questions? You can't explain that away through just saying they would cover it up. This would be a national scandal way too big to cover up. Yes, maybe Kiryu just wants to protect his children and he's thinking that it's too risky to call their bluff, but it's just silly. This whole deal that he made with the Daidoji faction is silly when you consider that this is somehow voluntary and that he made the deal. We'll leave my thoughts on the Daidoji for later, though. Just back to the story. At the castle, Saruno tells Kiryu of the plot to dissolve the Omi and the Tojo. It's just revealing all the plot from Yakuza 7. Saruno tells Kiryu that the only thing in the way of the plan is Homari Nishitani III. Saruno tells Kiryu that he has to take out Nishitani because he will not go along with the plan. He doesn't have to kill him, he just has to get him out of the picture. This whole time, Nishitani is listening in. He sends his goons after Kiryu and Kiryu has to fight them, all the while trying to escape the castle. Right before he can get to the helipad, Nishitani tries to run him down with a motorcycle. It is a really awesome Akira slide. He fights Kiryu and loses, though. Nice slide, jackass. He says he knew from the fight that Kiryu was not an ordinary civilian. He reveals that he knows Kiryu is the Dragon of Dojima, and the screen goes black. Chapter 4 starts immediately where Chapter 3 left off, only this time, before Nishitani can get out the words, Dragon of Dojima, Kiryu knocks him out cold. He then leaves the castle. Saruno uses his position in the Omi Alliance to grant him safe passage and make sure the other Yakuza there don't harm him. Back in Sotenbori, they put together a plan to get Nishitani to leave the castle. They gather all the money they can find, and they have a huge night on the town. They flaunt their wealth and power, and their faces all over the city in an effort to enrage Nishitani and force a confrontation somewhere in the city. This is one of my favorite parts in the game. It's so fun when all these tough gangsters go and hang out together. It's just Kiryu and the boys going to play golf and pool. And they even Shiromano does karaoke. They also banter with each other while walking from place to place. It's just a really fun scene. It's a cool, fun way to try and draw Nishitani out. This doesn't work exactly according to plan, though, as all Nishitani seems to do is send more goons into the city to find him. This even has the effect of the Kijin clan trashing establishments Kiryu was in just out of spite, like the Cabaret Grand from Yakuza 0 and Yakuza 2. Hanawa eventually gets involved and pays for all the damage done using the Daidoji's immense wealth. You could say their infinite wealth. He tells Kiryu that Nishitani has left the castle and gone to the Kijin clan HQ. He suggests Kiryu should take over the castle while he is gone. This will force Nishitani out just like Saruno planned. Kiryu agrees. He calls up Saruno, and the two, along with Shishido and some Watase family men, head to the castle. They encounter what Kiryu calls light security. In reality, about 30 or so Kijin clan goons. They are swiftly defeated, and Kiryu takes control of the vessel. I'm the captain now. He puts the ship into motion and sets sail for Osaka Bay. The sighting of the castle in Osaka Bay is a national incident. Everyone now knows about the existence of the vessel, and the Japanese Coast Guard is scrambled to find the ship. Although he quickly brings it back out to sea, he does accomplish his mission of enraging Nishitani. Nishitani calls Kiryu and demands that they settle the score. He tells Kiryu that his second-in-command, the Kijin clan captain, will be waiting for him at the Sotenbori Golf Center the next day. Kiryu goes back to Akame's house the rest of the night, and then goes back to the golf center the next day. At the golf center, Kiryu's expecting one man, but he is ambushed by many Kijin clan men. Suddenly, Shishido arrives on the scene in a car and climbs out and helps Kiryu defeat all the Yakuza. He tells Kiryu to get in the car, and they will take him to Kijin clan HQ, and they will confront Nishitani III together. Kiryu agrees, and they set off in the car. On the way, Shishido tells Kiryu a little bit more about Nishitani III's backstory. As it would turn out, Nishitani III is not related to the Homari Nishitani from Yakuza 0. Nishitani III is actually Korean. He got his start in the Jingwan Mafia, the same Jingwan Mafia that has caused so many problems in the series so far, and has also caused me a lot of pronunciation problems. After the Jingwan collapsed, he became a Yakuza member, and he hid his true identity by assuming a new one. His secret eventually came out, but at that point he had already amassed so much power and influence that the Omi Alliance turned a blind eye and just overlooked it. Shishido expresses his disdain for such a blatant breach of the code of conduct for the Yakuza organizations. We already know from Chapter 2 that Shishido doesn't like Nishitani or the Kijin from his own past, and now he's going to help take him down. Kiryu and Shishido arrive at the Kijin clan HQ, and they start making their way through waves of Yakuza. They eventually make their way to Nishitani's office, but the building is caught fire during all this ruckus. They confront Nishitani, and Nishitani says that he can't figure out why the Watase family, and especially why Kazuma Kiryu, wants to take him down. He also says that he doesn't really care, because it's going to be all resolved when he just kills both of them. Kiryu once again fights Nishitani III one-on-one, and he once again emerges victorious. Big shocker. And he knocks Nishitani III out cold. As the building is burning down, he starts to drag Nishitani out of danger. Shishido tells Kiryu to leave Nishitani to perish in the blaze, but Kiryu, being the noble guy that he is, refuses, and gets Shishido to help him carry the man out. Kiryu leaves Shishido to carry Nishitani by himself for just a moment, as he props open the door to the fire escape with a brick. But as he turns back, he sees Shishido murdering Nishitani in cold blood, with Nishitani's own blade. Kiryu is enraged and demands an explanation. Shishido says this was always the plan, and it was even approved by Tsuruno. They just purposely left Kiryu out of the loop because they know that he would have objected. Before the conversation can go any further, the men have to leave the burning building and make their way down the fire escape. In the alley right in front of the now ablaze Kijin Clan HQ, Kiryu finds Tsuruno and several Watase family men waiting for the duo. Kiryu demands an explanation from Tsuruno, and Tsuruno goes on to say that this was both necessary and revenge. He tells a story about one of his own men that Nishitani tortured to death for leaving the Yakuza, even though Tsuruno was just going to let the man go. Shishido chimes in and says it was also retaliation for all the people that Nishitani has killed in cold blood over the years for seemingly no reason. And Tsuruno says this is the only reason that he agreed to the breakup of the Yakuza as a whole in the first place. He agreed so that people like Nishitani would no longer get away with their sadistic actions. He also says that Nishitani would have never agreed to the dissolution of the Omi Alliance, and all the Yakuza that would be upset by the breakup would have just joined up with him instead, making a whole new problem. Tsuruno says what's done is done. The only thing left to do is to wait for Watase to get out of jail so that the Yakuza can be dissolved. The chapter ends with a glance back inside Nishitani's office. The room is quickly filling up with smoke and fire, but on the ground, the only thing there is a pool of blood. But Nishitani, whose corpse should be there, is missing. The game fast-forwards a few months and shows the events of Yakuza 7 up to the point of the night before the dissolution of the Omi and the Tojo. Kiryu is back at the shrine with Hanawa, and Hanawa shares with him his thoughts about the current situation. He says that the Daidoji once thought that the plot to end the Omi/the Tojo was unimportant. Things have changed now, that Ryo Aoki from Yakuza 7 has taken control of the Citizens Liberal Party with the help of the Omi. He says that now the Daidoji are fully behind Kiryu and the rest of the plotters. He says that Kiryu has done more for the Daidoji than anyone else when you factor in the $50 billion in assets given by the Watase family in the dissolution plot. Kiryu and Hanawa then share a moment where Kiryu reflects on Yumi, his dead love and Haruka's mother. He says he would like to go to Hawaii. There's a church there that Yumi always wanted to get married at. He takes a ring he's been holding on to forever that he wanted to propose to Yumi with, and he says he wants to leave the ring at that church. Hanawa says that he knows what Kiryu really wants is to see his children at morning glory, but that he can't allow that. Kiryu says he knows, but that he appreciates it. Back at Akame's, Tsuruno apologizes to Kiryu about Nishitani. He says he doesn't feel bad about the fact that he's dead, but rather he feels bad that he kept Kiryu in the dark and roped him into it. Kiryu forgives him, and Tsuruno talks to him about the dissolution plans for tomorrow. He tells Kiryu about Kasuga Ichiban, and tells him they recruited him for more muscle. He leaves to prepare for tomorrow, and Kiryu ties up his loose ends in Sotenbori. It's kind of a weird scene to throw in here, if you ask me, like, hey, man, sorry we made you an accessory to murder, but, like, I don't regret it at all, and I'm not really sorry. I'm just sorry that you feel bad about it. Nevertheless, they bury the hatchet. The big day has arrived, and starts with Kiryu, Tsuruno, and Shishido meeting up at a construction site in Osaka. This is where Watase, who was just released from prison, is going to meet them, and they will all go to the Omi HQ together. There are plenty of Omi Alliance men there as well. Watase arrives by way of cab, and all the Omi men bow to him and welcome him back. This scene shows just how much respect Watase commands, and how powerful within the Yakuza world he is. He greets the three men and thanks his subordinates for getting this far. He exchanges pleasantries with Kiryu, as well as some banter about all the money that he spent to get him here. Watase makes some remarks about the events that will take place today. He says he never wanted this for the Yakuza, but this is the only dignified way forward. He says it's better to end it all here, rather than serve as lapdogs to the police and the government. Suddenly, Shishido asks Watase if he has the dissolution papers on him. The camera pans to him, and we see that he has been recording this entire encounter on his phone. He says he's going to use it to make the plot public to the Omi. He reveals himself to not have ever been on the side of the plot, not even from the beginning. He says he's going to kill the other three and take over the Watase family. All the other Omi men that are standing around are all revealed to be on Shishido's side. Kiryu, Watase, and Tsuruno have all fallen into his trap. Shishido says that he isn't a traitor. It's Watase and Tsuruno who betrayed all the members of the Omi. He says that he's going to expose the scheme, is going to use all this momentum to be the new chairman of the Omi Alliance. He says he would never stand by the dissolution, because being a Yakuza had taken him from being a nobody to being feared and respected, and that if that was taken away from him, he would just be a nobody again. Tsuruno is in disbelief and asks, how could Shishido do this? How could he betray the family after all they had done for him? After all that he had done for him? Shishido responds that while Tsuruno might have gotten him in the door, he himself is the one that got him to where he is at. He scratched and clawed his way up. He made himself into the man he is with his own hands. A huge garbage truck races towards the men and narrowly hits them, although they manage to get out of the way just in time. The car they were planning on taking to Omi HQ wasn't so lucky though, and is destroyed as the truck comes to a screeching halt. Several Yakuza jump out of the back of the truck, as does Homare Nishitani III. Nishitani, now sporting a bandage covering his eye, was never killed by Shishido. Shishido and Nishitani have been in cahoots since the night Nishitani died. Tsuruno is enraged and also confused at this point. He asks Shishido why he is with Nishitani, as he thought Shishido despised the man. Shishido says that he does still despise Nishitani, but that he needs him for the future of the Omi. He talks about how after he killed Nishitani, he revealed the entire plot to him. Nishitani agreed to band together because of Watase betraying him. He says that for many years he served Watase faithfully and only ever did right by him, and Watase repaid the favor by ordering his death. So the two men, as well as the Watase family and the Kijin clan, have banded together to stop the plot and take over the Omi. The line in the sand has been drawn, and the only thing left to do is fight. It's Kiryu, Watase, and Tsuruno against Shishido, Nishitani III, and the combined might of the Kijin clan and the Watase family. Against all odds, Kiryu and the rest emerge victorious. Kiryu knocks Shishido into a scaffolding deep within the construction site, which collapses and takes him out of the fight. Watase takes Shishido's phone, which has a video of him and Kiryu discussing the plot, and destroys it with a brick. Side note, has this guy never heard of like the cloud? That video definitely still exists. Nishitani suddenly springs back into action and cuts Tsuruno's leg with his knife. As he moves in to deliver the killing blow to Tsuruno, Watase steps in and takes the knife to the gut. Nishitani draws his knife back for another blow to Watase, but as he does so, a black limo speeds towards him and strikes the Kijin clan patriarch. The limo comes to a halt, and Hanawa comes out of the driver's seat, and Akame comes out of the passenger side as well. Hanawa says he figured Kiryu would need some backup. He says he heard from Akame that Nishitani was spotted in Sotenbori earlier today, and he thought that Kiryu would be in trouble, so he came here. Akame has new suits for Kiryu and Watase too, since they are currently covered in blood. The men change into their new clothes, and Akame patches up Watase and uses makeup to hide the bruising on his face. Still, Watase is now in a bad way, and he will no longer be able to fight, although he will still be able to give his speech. Hanawa ties up Nishitani and says someone from Daidoji will come around and take him into custody. Kiryu thanks Akame for all she has done for him since arriving in Sotenbori. The two say farewell, and Akame takes a leave while the men get into the limo and finally head to Omi HQ. Watase is in great pain during the ride, but is able to keep it together. Kiryu tells him that once inside, he will protect him with his life. The limo pulls in the Omi HQ, and all the Omi members bow to Watase as he walks in the door. Hanawa reminds Kiryu that he is first and foremost a Daidoji man, and that he must come back in one piece. Hanawa leaves in the limo, and Kiryu and Tsuruno head into the Omi HQ. It is here that we see the dissolution scene from Yakuza 7, but this time it's from Kiryu's perspective. Watase announces the dissolution of the Omi, and Daigo Dojima does the same with the Tojo. The Omi men throw down with Majima, Saejima, Ichiban, and his friends. During the all-out brawl, one of the Omi rushes at Watase with a knife. It is here that Kiryu enters the fray. He knocks the knife-wielding Omi out with a single punch. The Tojo officers rejoice at the revelation of Kiryu's survival. Daigo asks Watase if he's the one who found Kiryu. Watase says that he doesn't know who he's talking about, and that the man is simply a bodyguard he hired. He says he doesn't even know his name. The fight continues, and the plotters emerge victorious once again, with Ichiban comically collapsing out of exhaustion. Daigo approaches Kiryu, but is once again stopped by Watase. Watase once again reiterates that Kiryu is just a bodyguard, and no one that you would know. He gets his point across by name-dropping the Daidoji. Daigo, Majima, and Saejima now all know that Kiryu is alive, but is unable to be part of the world they live in. They play along with the ruse, even if they would rather not. Daigo and Kiryu share a quick look at each other, and they can both be seen showing their inner turmoil on their faces. by saying nothing, they still say so much with just a look. They all file out, but not before Kiryu looks towards the unconscious Ichiban and says that he owes him one and that he'll see him around. There's a scene here where Majima and Kiryu have a little conversation. It's just more Majima saying he knows who he is and Kiryu saying he is no one. They share a moment of mutual understanding, and it's really heartwarming to see the two protagonists of the series share a moment. As they all leave the main hall and enter the courtyard, they all stop in disbelief of what they see. Shishido, covered head to toe in dust and dirt and still bloody and bruised from the fight at the construction site, is walking towards them slowly, carrying a katana slung over his shoulder. Shishido says that if they want to end the Omi, they will have to kill him first. Shishido charges Watase and brings down his sword, only to have it clash with Majima's knife. Majima thrusts his blade at Shishido, who blocks the blow by having the knife go right through his hand. Amazingly, this doesn't seem to affect him at all, and Saejima has to step in to protect Majima. Shishido, still with Majima's knife embedded in his palm, is able to knock down both the Tojo officers. He says he's still alive and breathing, just like the rest of the Omi Alliance. At this point, all the Omi men that were in the hall start filing out into the courtyard. They are bruised and bloody, but they are going to once again put up a fight. Watase is still in bad shape, and he's bleeding once again from his earlier knife wound. He has to be helped by Saruno in order to stand. Shishido rallies the Omi by challenging their pride. He says that this is the only chance it will ever have to control their own destiny, and they all must kill all the plotters in order to survive. He rips off his shirt to reveal his traditional Yakuza tattoos, which cover his entire back, both arms, and both pectorals. He commands the men to attack and defend their honor. Kiryu, realizing the reality of the situation, sheds his Daidoji agent persona. He has seen this type of Yakuza before, the type that only respects strength and will fight to the bitter end. He knows the only way to end this is by giving Shishido what he wants, the fight of his life. Daigo agrees with this logic, and he and Majima and Saejima step up to the plate. Daigo rips off his shirt to reveal his tattoos, just like Shishido did, and so do Majima and Saejima. In an extremely gratifying moment, Kiryu does as well. By physically removing his outer layer, he exposes his true self for the first time since joining the Daidoji. It is both a physical action and a symbolic one, and it shows that the Dragon of Dojima is still alive and stronger than ever. Just like every other time in the series, whenever the Tojo clan needs him the most, the Dragon of Dojima always answers the call. The four Tojo clan legends face off with Shishido in what remains of the Omi Alliance. After a prolonged battle, Shishido retreats into Omi HQ and beckons Kiryu to follow him. The three Tojo tell Kiryu to go ahead and finish it, while they remain and hold off the Omi. Kiryu finds Shishido deep within Omi HQ, inside the meeting room of the Omi Alliance, which bears the seal of the Omi Alliance on the wall. Shishido says that the power held by the Omi chairman is immense, and all that it would take is one word to mobilize all Yakuza in Japan, and that power is something to be respected. Kiryu says that the world that Shishido is talking about no longer exists, and change is going to come whether he accepts it or not. Shishido lashes out and says that he'll never accept that. He says that someone like Kiryu, who was once the most powerful Yakuza in Japan, and who resigned from the position of chairman of the Tojo clan, could never understand what being a Yakuza means to him and all the other Omi. For him and all the other Yakuza can't simply live a normal life like Kiryu can. This room, meaning the life as a Yakuza, is all they have. He says that this place and all that it stands for is a dream of all men like him, and that without it, they don't have any chance of survival. He says that Kiryu can never understand exactly just what it is that he and all the plotters have taken from him. Kiryu says that he does understand because he and Shishido are the same deep down. Yes, Kiryu may have thrown away his own life, even erased his name, but even still here, he is, once again, fighting for what he believes in. Here he is, fighting against impossible odds, just like Shishido is doing with the world. He says he understands Shishido wanting to be the strongest, because Kiryu still has the same desire in him. Shishido angrily asks if that Kiryu means all that, then how can he possibly justify tearing it all down? Why would he take the meaning of life away from thousands of people exactly like him? The answer is simple. Kiryu says that he and Shishido, and all the Yakuza like them, aren't special. While they all fight, everyone, meaning your average person living in society, is fighting and struggling to get through their daily lives. The dreams of the Yakuza mean nothing in comparison. Shishido refuses to listen and tells Kiryu that he is going to end him. He follows up by saying that once he is dead, he's going to pay a visit to his children in Okinawa. Kiryu sees his threat for what it is, just a mind game to throw him off, and tells Shishido the time to settle this once and for all is now. I'd like to take just a moment here to talk about how tragic and yet in a sort of weird way how authentic of a character Shishido is. This game is a spin-off, and I wasn't expecting that going into it I'd find such a memorable and well-written character, one who is now one of my favorite villains in the series. Remember back at the construction site when Shishido says that he doesn't have anything to thank Tsuruno for because he worked for it himself? I found myself empathizing with him a lot here. Shishido, by his own admission, was a nobody who, through the power of his will and the strength of his body, made a somebody out of himself. When he tells Kiryu that this room is all people like him have, and he can never accept the end of the Omi Alliance and how he fights even when he must know it's a losing effort, all of these things are how he feels a true Yakuza should be. There's a word in Japanese that all members of the Yakuza organizations depicted in the series refer to themselves as. The English subtitles simply say Yakuza, but if you listen to the actual words, they always say Gokudo. The word Gokudo, translated to English, means something like the extreme path. As we see many times in the series, once you join the Yakuza, you are in it for good. You never truly leave. It's impossible. Even Kiryu, who gave up his chairmanship of the Tojo clan, is always getting pulled back in. That's how he found himself in this situation, standing in the Omi HQ across from Shishido. He found himself here because he, like all the other people who came before him and all the other people he fought with today, walked the extreme path. To me, Shishido is the embodiment of Gokudo. He fights and struggles against forces that he must know he cannot win against, and he does it because he chose to be this way. He simply cannot stop being a Yakuza even if the Omi dissolve. It is much more than just a status to him. It is who he is as a person. He has chosen to walk the extreme path, and so he will fight until his lungs no longer draw breath. In my opinion, he is not only right to stand up and fight, but he is extremely justified in doing so. Imagine that everyone around you, people you look at as a family, all came together and conspired to take everything that makes you who you are away from you and leave you with nothing. Would you not stand up and fight? And if you wouldn't you at least want to stand up and fight? Shishido may be a violent thug, but he is also undeniably human. At the same time, though, Kiryu is obviously in the right as well. He is a man who has seen all of this before. He knows where all of this is headed, and for a long time now, he has wanted better for the Yakuza as a whole. He has lived life outside of the criminal underworld, and he knows that there's much more to life than this. Life is what you make of it. In this world of extreme violence, even a social outcast and convicted murderer like him can find a place he belongs. He also knows that there is no way he can explain this to Shishido, and his choice of fighting for a better future for the Yakuza is also justified. The duality of both characters having so much in common and fighting for wildly different futures is in a strange way beautiful and is one of the best scenes in the series for me. Once it is over, Kiryu once again stands as the victor. Watase tells the beaten Shishido that he put up a good fight, but it's all over now. Hanawa and Akame pull up in the limo again to take the victorious party home. A defiant Shishido is still struggling and is physically crawling towards the men, not ready to give up. He is knocked out by the Daidoji agent from earlier in the game, who is the one who put Kiryu in the cell. He says that Shishido is going to make a wonderful agent for the Daidoji, just like Nishitani, who they have also picked up. We are back at the shrine, now forward in time to the year 2020. Kiryu is still there in exile, although he's very friendly with the monk who lives there nowadays. Hanawa pays him a visit and tells him the Daidoji faction is going to reward him for all his hard work. He says that Kiryu's been running around for them, then shows a quick flashback to Kiryu versus Ichiban and the ending of Yakuza 7, and needs a break. Hanawa says he's grateful to Kiryu for everything he did for the Daidoji, but also for saving his life. He says he'd like to show Kiryu something, and hands him a tablet. It is here where the most heartbreaking scene of the game, and perhaps of the series, plays out. On the tablet is footage from a hidden camera the Daidoji have set up in Okinawa. The camera is in a graveyard, pointing at Kiryu's grave. The footage was taken on the anniversary of Kiryu's death. It shows Haruka and her now 4-year-old son, Haruto, visiting Kiryu's grave. You can see the shock and melancholy on Kiryu's face. The little boy, his grandson, who he had fought so hard to protect and who he gave up his whole life for, can walk now. He's a normal, healthy child like any other. His daughter is doing fine and is safe and happy like he always wanted her to be. It's not just them either. All the kids from Morning Glory arrive and visit his grave too. Calling them kids isn't exactly correct as they're all young adults now. All of them. Ayako, Eri, Riona, Izumi, Taichi, Koji, Mitsuo, and Shiro are all grown up and living their lives. They all still remember him and come visit him from time to time. They all come to pay their respects and then they leave, returning to their lives. The last two at the grave are Ayako and Taichi. Ayako, always having been the smart one, notices the camera pointing at the grave due to the lens flare. Ayako and Taichi deduce that since it's aimed towards the grave, it means that this camera was set up by someone who knows them and wants to watch over them. They reason that this person is Kiryu himself. Taichi then says if there's a chance that Kiryu is watching, then they have nothing to lose by talking to the camera. Over the next minute or so, Taichi and Ayako talk to the camera about how they and the rest of the Morning Glory children have been doing fine in his absence. They also say that no one at Morning Glory really believe that Kiryu is dead. Taichi says he's a firefighter now because when bad things happen and people in trouble need help, he wants to be the one to stand up and do what's right, just like Kiryu taught him. The two children go into detail about how all of them have found something to pursue in life and they can always lean on their family, the family that Kiryu built for them when they need support. They say they're all really busy and they think that Kiryu must be busy too, because if he is still alive, he would definitely go and see them. They ask that if Kiryu does see this footage, to leave them a sign so that they know he's out there. They say they aren't asking him to come back and live with them, but they thought that he might be lonely out there, all alone by himself. They tell him that when he's ready, they will all be waiting there for him to come back. Throughout this whole scene, Kiryu gradually starts to break until all his emotions that he's been holding back for years come pouring through. The man who has always stood strong and rarely showed such emotions is no longer able to keep it together. The tablet screen starts shaking due to his hands shaking, and the screen slowly fills up with teardrops. They say they're going to come back tomorrow and have all the kids talk to the camera, and they have something to give him. They say goodbye and leave with smiles on their faces. Hanawa says they removed the camera after this footage was taken, due to the kids catching on. Hanawa says that showing him this was supposed to be a reward, but he wonders that if it did more harm than good. Hanawa says that although he couldn't have the agents recover the item the kids left him the next day, he had them take a picture of it, and he shows it to Kiryu. It's a crude drawing, made by crayon, of everyone at Morning Glory, drawn by Haruto. In the middle is Kiryu. Kiryu is deeply moved by this, as it means that Haruto knows who he is and might remember him. Last time he saw Haruto, he couldn't even talk, and now he can read and write. Hanawa remarks that Haruto has grown up splendidly, as has Haruka and everyone else. Kiryu says a line that perfectly captures everything in this scene.
あいつらはとっくに自分の足で立って歩いてる。なのに俺が一人で寂しいって口に出すことさえできずにいた。子離れできてなかったのは俺だけだったんだな。
The monk chimes in to comfort Kiryu by saying that since Taichi said he was driven to be someone who helps people in need, that must be the sort of person the children saw Kiryu as growing up. Kiryu says that hearing that doesn't make him feel any better, but he thanks the monk and he thanks Hanawa for showing all this to him. The monk reminds him that the Daidoji are still offering him a reward if he wants it. He can take a vacation anywhere he wants with no set time limit, as long as that place is not Okinawa or Kamurocho. Hanawa reminds him that Kazuma Kiryu is a dead man. He will always be followed and watched by the Daidoji, but as long as he stays true to his promise, he's essentially a free man. This one scene captures so many emotions, and it's so profound in its ability to make you just feel. I remember talking to a friend who was also a fan of the franchise about this scene, and they said something that I think perfectly describes the impact of the scene on anyone who has played every game of the franchise. They said they were sitting on their couch playing the game, and when they came to this cutscene, they noticed that halfway through, their glasses fogged up and they could no longer read the subtitles. They removed their glasses and discovered the reason that they had been fogged up is because they had been crying like a baby. After the scene was over, they just put the controller down and just thought about life. My reaction wasn't as extreme, but I was also playing the game in front of a different friend who hasn't played the series, who I didn't want to see me breaking down because of a video game. I'm pretty sure if I had been alone, my reaction would have been the same way as my other friends. This may sound pretentious or silly or whatever, but I believe that sometimes video games can be considered art. Not all of them, of course, but certain ones such as the Yakuza series can be. Think about this scene as if you were Kiryu. Your family that you have fought so hard to provide a good life for has that life now. Way, way back at the beginning of all this, was just a meeting in a dingy bar somewhere between a convicted murderer thrust into an unfamiliar and hostile world after a decade behind bars, and a scared 9-year-old girl desperately trying to find her mother, wielding a pistol to protect herself from the entire Japanese underworld who were hunting her for something entirely out of her control. And now look where we are. Her son, who was similarly hunted for simply being born, is now living a normal childhood. Her brothers and sisters, all of whom are fellow orphans and all would have been just another group of outcasts society failed without Kiryu's intervention, are all growing up to be fine individuals. They all live happily together in the childhood home that he built and protected from danger multiple times. Well, they have everything he ever wanted for them. They're missing one thing: him. And the reason he isn't there is to protect them, like he always has from the very beginning. He must live a lie to ensure their future. Even though they most likely know that he is still alive, or at least hold out hope that he is, they all must live this cruel ruse. You can't have your cake and eat it too. When he bursts into tears, something on the scale that we've only seen once before in the series, it rips at you. It just feels so wrong. I equate it to watching your dad cry or someone like that in your life. To this point, Kiryu has always been a stone wall with this stuff, or at least as far as showing it openly. He has always carried his burden silently, and now here it comes pouring out. It shows that above all else, Kiryu is human. He may be a legendary Yakuza. He may have the strength to fight 100 men at once. He may be a secret government agent. But deep down, he's just a father who misses his children. This scene cuts into another scene where Kiryu has packed his bags and is leaving the shrine. Hanawa asks him if he's going to Hawaii first, and Kiryu responds that he's going to save the best for last. The monk and the man in the wheelchair from earlier look on from afar. The monk says that the wheelchair-bound man must trust Kiryu an awful lot, but the man just says that by rewarding Kiryu, it sets a good example to everyone else in the organization. The monk says that the Dragon of Dojima is a fearsome ally, and warns the other man that making an enemy of him would be very unwise. Hanawa hands Kiryu all the documents he's going to need for travel: ID, passport, the works. He says he already registered it under the alias Taichi Suzuki. Kiryu chuckles and says that he has used that name before. If you remember, he used that back in Yakuza 5. Hanawa says that he knows, and Kiryu stops and realizes that he never told anyone in Daidoji that he used to go by that name. Hanawa says that a long time ago, he had the opportunity to know Kiryu when he was under that alias. He says Kiryu and himself are not that different, as they are both men who have erased their past and their names. Kiryu walks into the sunset towards a new life, and the credits roll. After the credits, Kiryu is shown in 2023 with a new haircut and in the church that Yumi told him about. He leaves the ring on the altar, and the game ends. Well, after all that, how are you feeling? It's a lot to take in for sure. After beating the game, I had to take a couple of days to even form thoughts about the ending. In the end, I found that the back half of the game was a lot more enjoyable than the first half. It takes a while for the game to find its legs, but when it does, it sure does start running. On the subject of the first half, let's talk about something that has been bugging me from the very beginning of the game: the premise. I find this whole secret agent thing to be frustrating from a storytelling standpoint. Right away, you can tell this was not the vision that RGG Studio had when they ended Yakuza 6. Somewhere along the lines, they decided that they want to have Kiryu be part of the soft reboot of the series, and so they crafted a story to go along with that. The problem with that is that by doing that, you ruin or at the very least diminish the perfect and neat ending of Yakuza 6. We go from neat and all loose ends tied up at the end of Yakuza 6 to a very messy and confusing present state. My biggest problem with it is the Daidoji. The whole deal Kiryu and Daidoji made at the end of Yakuza 6 is not the deal that was present in this game. What's the deal with him having to do errands for them? Wasn't the deal that he was going to disappear to keep their secrets? At what point did he say, "Oh yeah, I'm also going to do jobs for you and expose my very well-known face to the world, potentially revealing that I faked my death for you and compromising our agreement"? With this premise, it's hard to immerse yourself into the game. It's kind of funny to me that out of all the things that happened in the Yakuza series, this is what jumped the shark for me. It's really hard to believe that Kiryu was doing all this willingly, or that the Daidoji would be foolish enough to send him out into the world while also wanting it to appear that he is dead. I have another major criticism that I'm going to save for the spoiler-free section that ties in with almost everything else in the game, but we can talk about it as it relates to the story here. Reused assets. There are so many reused assets in this game. Even a major character like Nishitani III, while not technically the same as the first Nishitani, is just basically the same character. Hell, they even say that he stole the name and the persona, which is fitting with the theme of reused assets. In Chapter 2 in the arena, when you fight the 3 rounds of Yakuza moments in the past, while the moments are reused themselves, so are all the fighting styles of the enemies. Actually, most fighting styles of enemies in the game are reused. While this game was made in only 6 months, it should not be all old stuff. Unfortunately, most of the gameplay is. Fortunately, though, the story does have a lot of good spots. I really cannot say enough just how much I love Chapter 5 in the Epilogue. The storytelling and the characters really come to life in the last couple hours of gameplay. While some aspects of the story are a little rough, you can tell that the team still really cares about telling stories that resonate with the player. The incredible work of Kiryu's voice actor is another extremely bright spot. Takaya Kuroda once again does an amazing job of bringing Kiryu to life. Even when you can't understand the language, there are some things that transcend the language barrier and are impactful and compelling. Where the Yakuza series shines most is its memorable and outlandish side content. If you've never played a Yakuza game before, I'm going to bet the only exposure to the series that you've had is through memes made about it. I'm talking stuff like Friday Night and Baka Mitai from Yakuza 0. With every new iteration in the series, I always look forward to the side content more than anything else, and Like a Dragon Gaiden was no different. In fact, the only things I ever saw about this game before playing it was a few posts on RGG's social media pages about the side content that was going to be featured. I never even watched the trailers. All they had to do was say Pocket Circuit, and I knew I was going to be playing this game day one. Besides Kiryu, the person you'll be seeing most is a new character named Akame.
Joryu.
Akame is what I'd call an information broker who operates in Sotenbori. She serves as a guide to Kiryu, feeding him information and helping him progress this story. Likewise, she'll be the player's guide to basically everything. She's in charge of side quests, the completion list, and she awards you the all-important Akame points. You access the vast majority of side content through Akame and her network. This is one of the major problems I have with the game. It's not like I don't like Akame, quite the opposite in fact. I don't know if I missed it, or maybe it was never explained at all, but to initiate every side quest proper, you must first have a conversation about it with Akame. Side quests in this game all start as a Akame request. You may be thinking, oh, just have a conversation with Akame? That doesn't sound too bad. And you're right. It's not too bad if you're only doing one side quest at a time. Here's the thing, though. Most side quests open up at the same time during Chapter 2. So whenever you decide to do side quests, which, even if you don't want to, you will eventually end up doing, because they provide so many Akame points, you have 2 options ahead of you. You can either A, start all the side quests at the same time, which means you have to sit through all the conversations back to back, or you can B, start one side quest, go complete it, and come back and start another one when you're done with it. I chose to go with option A, as that way even if I didn't want to do 10 plus side quests right away, they're now in the map, and I can do them whenever I want, instead of having to come back all the way to Akame to start a new quest. However, this means I was subjected to 20 minutes of doing nothing but sitting and talking to Akame. That's not an exaggeration either. Trust me, I timed it. It was actually a full 20 minutes. Remember, this is only to start all the side quests. This does not include the actual quests. After this whole ordeal, by the time you go to do the quest, you probably forgot what the quest that you want to do was even about. And the quests themselves? How are they? Well, like everything else in this game, there's good and there's bad. Since I just spent some time ragging on the game, let's start off with the good. In fact, let's start off with my favorite side quest in the game. This quest is called The World's Strongest Convenience Store Clerk. The rundown of the quest is that Akame gives you is that you heard you're looking for tough guys for your arena squad. I have lots to say about the arena later. She heard of a extremely tough clerk at a Popo store in Sotenbori, and she sends you on your way to recruit him. Kiryu goes to the Popo and he finds the clerk. This guy is pretty unassuming. He just seems like an average guy. He might be a little bit muscular, but doesn't seem too special. Kiryu asks him to join his crew, but the clerk says no because he can't spend the time away from work. Kiryu says he's fine with the guy just coming on his day off, but the guy says that he doesn't have days off. If I was a funnier guy, I would tell a joke right now about Japan's work culture. We learn that this dude's being held under the thumb of his oppressive manager. This dude is absolutely working the clerk to the bone. He's making him work 20 days in a row. And he punishes him for talking to Kiryu by giving him even more shifts. The clerk finally stands up for himself and says he's not going to do that and he just wants a normal schedule. Sounds reasonable, right? How does a manager respond? If he wants to negotiate his shifts, then he will have to beat him in a fight. And the clerk is just okay with this. So both Kiryu and the clerk proceed to beat the shit out of the manager. Oh, but it's not over though. The clerk says if Kiryu wants to recruit him to his team, he'll have to beat him in a one-on-one fight. So Kiryu beats the shit out of him too. Both these fights take place back-to-back in the middle of the store too. The clerk joins Kiryu's teams and the quest ends. I really, really want to get across to you that this rules. This rules so hard. This is a classic example of how over-the-top the Yakuza series can be. Quests like these is how I fell in love with this series, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that sentiment. It's a very memorable moment, and one that I'm sure I'll remember from this game forever. Remember how I said there was good and bad? Well, that was the very good. So let's go over the very bad. I want to ask those who have played the Yakuza series before a question. Remember this chick? Of course you do. She's remembered for being extremely annoying. In fact, that's her whole character. She's intentionally designed to be annoying. She's back for this game, and this is one of her worst appearances yet. Did anyone ever ask for her to come back, by the way? I'm going to be completely honest with you. I remember literally nothing about this quest besides that it sucks. It sucks because she is in it. It's also half an hour long. Now, I get what the developers are trying to do with this lady / this quest. The point is that she's annoying, but she's supposed to be endearing, and you're supposed to end up liking her, or at least you're supposed to end up sympathizing with her. There's a small problem with that, though. It's not endearing, it's not heartfelt, it's not even entertaining. It's just annoying. When I was playing it, it ruined all the momentum the game had going for it, and I stopped playing for several days. While we're on the subject of ruining momentum, let's talk about another major gripe I have with this game. It can drag on for long periods of time, and I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's not fully voiced. You might be saying, how can you possibly expect the whole game to be fully voiced? Be reasonable. I think I am being reasonable. Yakuza 6 is fully voiced, and that's a longer game than this one. Having the game be fully voiced keeps the game engaging even when the content on screen is not always entertaining. I remember there were side quests that weren't fantastic in Yakuza 6, but they never felt like they dragged on like the ones in this game. Even the side quest that stars Kaito and Higashi from fellow Yakuza spin-off series Judgment drags on. And this quest really should be a bright spot, but instead it's just forgettable. I don't understand Japanese, but having people speak and interact is a lot better than just reading walls of text over and over again. They already have the voice actors contracted for the game, right? So why not use them and let them show off their talent? Overall, I found all the Kame requests to be pretty disappointing. Almost all of the quests are pretty forgettable, and there's a couple chains of them that are just run here, beat these guys up, repeat. I know this is a spin-off game, but it's still disappointing to see it fall short like this. Alright, instead of me continuing to bash on the game, let's go back to having fun. How better to spend our time than with minigames? The minigames in the latest installment of the series are all familiar to longtime fans of the series. Minigames like billiards, golf, darts, poker, blackjack, and my personal favorite, karaoke. The karaoke lineup this time around is one of the best in the series. Definitely top 3 lineups. It features classics like Baka Mitai and Tonight. It features a remix of Ichizu Samurai from Like a Dragon Ishin. There's even a new song called Sayonara Silent Night. They're all pretty good, but my favorite thing about the lineup is that it features both my favorite solo song, Hands, and my favorite duet song, Like a Butterfly. Like a Butterfly features Akame as the lead this time around. I thought that was pretty neat. Needless to say, I spent a lot of time doing karaoke. The game also has the return of the Sega Arcade. Games in the arcade are pretty unremarkable, although it has Sonic the Fighters, which is pretty nostalgic for me. Also features the UFO catchers. I love spending about 5 minutes of the UFO catcher where I do pretty good for about 2 minutes, and then I can just never get another prize for the rest of the game. I mean, that's not the game's fault. That's just skill issue on my part. Not a lot to say about most of the minigames. I mean, sure, pool is fun, but it's nothing new or special. Same with the gambling games and darts. It's fun that they're in the game, but it's not exactly a selling point. There is a new take on an old minigame, though. That minigame being the Hostess Club. No, not the real fun Cabaret Club minigame from Yakuza 0 and Yakuza 2. Unfortunately, it's the minigame where you go and talk to hostesses one-on-one. However, instead of the hostesses being in-game models, this time they use footage from real-life actresses. The gameplay itself consists of you talking to the hostesses, choosing a topic of conversation, answering questions, / flirting with the girls. Answer questions right, your heart gauge goes up. Answer them wrong, gauge goes down. Once you fill the heart gauge all the way up, you beat the minigame. Do this 3 times for one hostess, and you complete her portion of the minigame. The real-life actresses range from gravure models to a JAV actress. Yes, I'm being 100% serious. And all the way to a former VTuber. For any HoloLive fans out there, you might recognize the hostess named Kay as former HoloLive Generation 3 VTuber Kiryu Coco. She's also still an online personality going by the name Kay-san. If you can't tell from the way I'm talking, I love Kay-san. She's by far the best hostess of the bunch, and honestly probably the only one worth completing. Also, she's going to have a role in the next installment of the series, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, so I would go through her content since you're going to be seeing her again. And why did I say she was probably the only one worth completing? It's because the minigame itself is only just alright. It's not bad by any means, but if I wanted to embarrass myself in front of women, I could just do that in real life instead of a video game. As a reward for completing all the dates with the hostess, you get a special scene of them out of the hostess club. These scenes range from comedic to basically just a gravure shoot. There's a reason this game is rated M. There is one minigame missing here that I haven't talked about yet. That one's being Pocket Circuit. Don't worry, we'll get there. It's just such a massive minigame that I had to put it in its own section. Hey guys, so we were going to have Pocket Circuit as a section here. It turned out a lot bigger than what we wanted. It's not going to fit in the video. So if you're watching this on close to release, it's probably going to be nothing here. But if you were watching this weeks later, click on this and it'll take you to our Pocket Circuit video, and you can have all the fun of Pocket Circuit in the world there. But here's a quick sneak peek starting now. The course record was 1 minute, 40 seconds. Okay, so we go in there, make a brand new car, everything's solid. We beat the record by about 12 seconds. It was 128 something. Sounds good, right? 12 seconds. I don't think we've ever beat a course record that badly. So we go to the race thing, and it's going to be really easy, right? Run the same car. We get beat by a second trying our hardest. So the default is if you don't do any time attack and you don't try out anything, you just take your own car in there. And we lost in 4th place and getting our asses kicked. What would happen if you just do none of that? Perhaps the biggest chunk of gameplay that isn't the main story is this, the arena. Technically, it's the Coliseum, but I like to say arena instead, so that's what we're going to go with. Just know that if I say arena, I mean Coliseum. And if I say Coliseum, I mean arena. You are first introduced to the arena in Chapter 2 of the main story, where Kiryu goes through 3 rounds of fights, winning them all, of course. After this mission, and once the castle opens up for free roam, you are free to start the arena minigame. There are 2 distinct activities to get up to here, or technically 3 if you count solo fighting. There's the arena fights proper, and there's an arena chain of side quests that open up further along in the main story. Let's start off with the arena fights themselves. In the arena, there are fights that all pose different challenges. You can lose either by running out of health or by running out the time limit, which is usually 3 minutes. There are solo fights, which range from fighting one opponent to several rounds of one-on-one fights, to you versus a group, and all the way to you versus a gauntlet of 100 enemies. These aren't too difficult as long as you are leveled up properly and entered the fight with full health and heat, because you can't use recovery items in the arena fights. Always remember to charge up your heat by using the ashtray to smoke in the reception. Make sure that you pick up that ability first, though. The next type of fight is the one that is the main selling point, Hell Team Rumble. This mode is where you put together a roster of fighters and fight alongside them against other teams. Each fighter has a role, attacker, defender, healer, a rank, bronze, silver, gold, and a special ability. The abilities vary widely and can be passive, like healing teammates when they're in close proximity, or they can be active, such as a special attack that affects a wide area. It's similar to Majima Construction from Yakuza 2 and the Clan Creator from Yakuza 6 in terms of recruitment and kind of composition, meaning, roles and abilities. However, it's different when it comes to gameplay. In the 2 previous modes, the objective was either to attack or defend certain objectives on a predetermined map. In this new mode, the objective is to simply defeat all the opponents within the time limit. You assemble the team by finding characters and asking them to join your team. For some of them, you can pay different people at the castle to recruit members for you, and the recruits they get range from real good to real bad. Some of them you can only recruit through beating them in one-on-one fights in the arena and then talking to them afterwards. And some fighters can only be recruited through completed side missions via Kame request. Those ones tend to be your strongest fighters. A lot of the fighters are recurring characters that you've seen throughout the series. People like the weird cultists from Yakuza 0, you know, the Shora Beep Beep, those guys. The Yakuza patriarch who likes getting treated like a baby from Yakuza 2. Even main characters from the Judgment series, Kaito and Higashi. And we also have my personal favorite, Gary Buster Holmes.
Gary Buster Holmes!
So, we meet again. Bet you wasn't expecting me, Kazuma-san. You gonna squeal like a bitch, motherfucker.
In addition to the roles and abilities each fighter has, they also have different fighting styles which determine their behavior towards enemies. Their styles can also be somewhat kind of counterintuitive to what you might think. Like, Higashi is a healer, but his style is aggressive, so he will pursue enemies and not stick behind healing allies like a healer probably should. You can have 10 fighters on your active roster plus yourself, although some fights may have special conditions that limit the makeup of your roster. Some fights only allow you to take in 4 fighters, some might only allow you to take fighters that have the defender role, etc., etc. The game splits your roster into 2 lines, one in the front and one in the back. Each line has a max capacity of 5 fighters. When assembling your team, I know it's important to have your fighters in the correct spot in the line, but I honestly can't really figure out what difference it makes. I eventually just put all my healers in the back and all my fighters that had the aggressive style in the front, and it usually worked out. I would notice that when I would change their positions in the line in the same fight, it might have a different outcome, but I mean, I can't really draw a tangible conclusion from what change impacted what. Even when after I beat the game and I looked online to see if everyone else had the same experience as me, it would seem that, well, at the time I looked it up at least, everyone has a different opinion on how your lines should be formed, and they all have different reasons for it. My advice is to form your team up of a balance of all 3 roles, make sure they're at the gold rank, that's very, very important, make sure they're gold rank, and experiment till you find what works for you. The Team Hell Rumble fights themselves are fun for a bit, but they can get tedious pretty quick. It just takes a long time to get through all of it, and it stops being fun after a while. This is only half the arena content, though, and yeah, unfortunately, it's the half that's good. The not fun half of the arena is the arena side missions that open up once you complete enough of the main story. Midway through Chapter 4, if I recall correctly. You were introduced to this questline through the main story, and when you are, it's like a huge buzzkill, because it happens right when the middle of the story is getting good. Basically, there are 4 kings of the arena. You have to fight all of them, and sometimes the squads they assemble. I don't even remember 2 of their names, and if you had a gun to my head asking me all their names, you might as well just pull the trigger, because I'm never going to get it right. The first one is this clown-looking dude named Dan Brody. I remember his name because he's the one introduced to you in the main story, and because he's the guy who gave me my second game over. Yes, that's correct. I lied to you when I said I only had 1 game over my whole playthrough. To be fair to me, though, this one wasn't due to getting beat. It was just due to running out of the time limit, so I'm not terrible. He and his squad really are no big deal. My fighters were just underleveled, and they couldn't do enough damage to defeat all of them in the time limit. Skill issue. I know, I suck. After some grinding in the arena, he's quick to be defeated. So next line is the 4 kings after him. This guy is so remarkable. All I remember about him is that he was easy to beat. That's about it. Okay, here's where the problem with the arena comes in. Enter the 3rd of the 4 kings. This sci-fi looking guy is named Justice. This fight is perhaps the worst the game has to offer. Justice doesn't play fair. He recruits the other 2 kings you just beat to his squad, also has about 24 goons, and you only have 3 minutes to beat them all. Normally, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but he has some gimmicks that make it really tough to take him down. First is his insane health bar. It's over at least 20 bars of full health, and he can be healed by some members of his squad while he's fighting you. It's a big problem, but on its own, it could be, overcome, written off, just a tough fight, right? Here's where we get to our second gimmick and the most overpowered ability ever. Justice has a tendency to stick to the back of the crowd, and he unleashes one move over and over again. This move is firing a cannon that he has attached to his arm. It shoots laser beams that go the length of the arena, and he moves in a sweeping motion from one side to the other. When this beam hits you or your team, it takes down almost all your health, drains all your heat, and stuns you for around 10 seconds or more. Even this would not be that big of a deal if it wasn't for the 3-minute time limit. I suffered game over after game over. For the vast majority of them, I had him all alone on his health bar and seconds away from defeat. It is so frustrating coming so close every time and failing by mere seconds. You may be thinking, this sounds like a you problem, skill issue, get good, or any other classic line about being bad at video games. All right, these are all fair points. Let's say you're right. I'm just bad at video games. How would you go about this fight? Change up the roster of fighters? Good idea. I tried almost every combination I could think of, and nothing worked for the longest time. Here's another flaw with the team system. You can't actually command your fighters. You can activate your special ability, which will boost their attack and defense for a short period, but you cannot direct them in battle in any way whatsoever. If you could simply tell your fighters to focus on one enemy, or focus on the small enemies, or protect this specific area, or maybe any command at all, I think this fight would not be as nearly as hard. Okay, let's go with something else then. Maybe it's my fault for not leveling Kiryu up all the way. Okay, fair point. So, I maxed out every single ability and even grinded for money in the arena and filled out a ton of the completion list for the Akame points to level up. I did all this so I could upgrade both the health boost extreme Kiwami and attack boost extreme Kiwami. After having a fully upgrade Kiryu, I found that it made almost no difference at all. Okay, maybe it's just the strategy that I'm using in the fight. I should try all sorts of different tactics, right? Like maybe let's only focus on justice, or maybe focusing on one of the other 3 kings at a time, or maybe taking down all the other weaker enemies so that my team can focus on dealing damage to the 3 kings. Well, my friend, it all sounds good, it doesn't work. I even took the walk of shame and went online to look at how other players beat this fight. To my dismay, it would seem that I am not alone in being unable to beat him. Almost everything I read on it was people saying, "This fight sucks, I give up." Yeah, real helpful, I know. There's a quote that is often said in life that goes, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result." Apparently, the person who said this was Albert Einstein, according to a quick Google search. I have no idea if he actually said this or not, but if he did, I would just like to say, Einstein ain't got shit on me, because after many, many hours of trying and many dozens of attempts, I did finally manage to beat this fight. I absolutely hated every minute of it and felt nothing but a nagging feeling that I wasted hours of my life doing this that I could have spent doing literally anything else. We're not done yet, though. He's only the 3rd king of the 4 kings, remember? So after all that, you get to fight the 4th king, and he's just a pushover. There's some story stuff about how they stole the gadgets you got from this dude, the ones that use an agent style, and you're supposed to feel bad or mad or something. But at this point, after all the hours of fighting justice, I just lost my ability to care about it. So what's a big reward after all this? More arena fights. There's a twist, however. These final fights are with the series regulars, the Amon clan. I'll admit that up to this point in the series, I never encountered the Amon clan, because to face them, you usually have to complete everything else in the game, and then you have a final showdown with Amon himself. The only thing I knew about the Amon clan is that they're notoriously tough to beat. The first fight is an arena-style gauntlet with 6 Amon clan robots that look like they could fit right in with the Lin Kuei from Mortal Kombat. They each take place in an arena that looks like the top of the Millennium Tower back in Kamurocho. Each robot has the combat style of one of the final bosses of each Yakuza game, starting backwards from 6 and ending at 1. It's not particularly difficult, and you should know these movesets by heart anyways. At this point, I knew that this couldn't be the real Amon boss fight, and of course it's not. I will say that the real Amon boss fight did live up to the hype, and if this wasn't a Dragon Engine game, I probably would have lost once or twice before I beat him. Unfortunately for Amon, this is a Dragon Engine game, and you know what that means. You can simply stock up on dozens upon dozens of healing items and never die. This is not actually what you want to do, though, as I found that out pretty quickly. See, Amon's health bar is always regenerating as you fight him, so you can't just whittle him down while staying healed up. Good news is that Kiryu has many abilities that will boost his attack power tremendously when he's at low health and in extreme heat mode. And since you can use items freely, you can always be in extreme heat mode. So, what's the strategy for beating Amon? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Right bumper plus Y. Move over, Tiger Drop. There's a new sheriff in town, and it's whatever this move is. Just keep doing it over and over and don't get hit, and that's it. After all that, I just have to say the arena is really not worth it as far as the side missions go. I hope all that rambling I just did gets that across to you. I would do the Hell Team Rumbles so that you can get the good arena fights to give you lots of money, but the missions themselves are really, really not worth it. Don't waste your time. So, after all that, what do I think about the game? Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. The game is very enjoyable at stages. It follows the classic Yakuza game formula, and just like a classic Yakuza game, it's very entertaining. The combat is easy to pick up and fun to master. Something that's a plus that I didn't even mention is the ability to customize Kiryu's outfit. If you've been watching and wondering why Kiryu looks so dripped out to the socks, that's why. The new characters are cool, likable when they're supposed to be liked, and hateable when they're supposed to be hated, etc. The side content is alright, although repetitive. The soundtrack is solid, although there's no single track that stands out. For a game made in 6 months, it's pretty polished. My biggest problem with the game is reused assets. I've tried to avoid talking about it until now, but it is a massive problem. Almost everything in this game, aside from the story, is reused in some way. All of the fighting styles of the enemies are reused. Sotenbori and Ijincho are reused locations. There's no original minigames besides Hell Team Rumble, and that's nothing to write home about. There's so many times in this game when I've come across something, and it's been like, hey, that seems familiar. And then it turns out to be copied from another game and pasted into this one. It really feels like RGG Studio kind of phoned this one in while making it. I've been very critical on this game throughout this video, and there's a reason for that. I hold the Yakuza series to a high standard because I know that they can be better. This series has some very good games, and that would mean that RGG Studio can make good games. This one is disappointing, especially considering the price tag. Let's talk about that price tag. This game on release went for $50. I absolutely cannot justify spending $50 on this game. Even though it's less than the standard $60, or in more recent years $70, it still feels like way more than it's worth. This game feels like a cash grab, and honestly, the idea that they have of making this a chapter in the next game is the one they should have went with. This game is not horrendous, though, and it does have its moments. I played it through Xbox Game Pass, and if you were thinking of buying it, I would pick it up on Game Pass instead. It also recently went on sale for 20% off if you do want to purchase it. The main story isn't that long either, and you could probably just look it up or watch this review, just saying. After all that, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to comment to tell us what you think about this game. If you disagree with me, agree with me, whatever, please just let me know. And you can always hit that button.
That bell, that notification.
No, I'm thinking of like hit the so if they want to go back to like Paper Mario review and I have like an annotation here that has a link to it, what do I say?
Hit this card. I guess it would be a card, or it would be this link.
If you want, you can click this link here and I'll take you back to our Paper Mario review, and we have more videos coming out in the future. Thank you so much.